It's only been a few weeks since my last Everything Known About Pax Day video, but the developers have linked so much new information that last video is already obsolete. But recently they've slowed down with new information, so I think now is a good time to redo this video. Let's get into everything we currently know about Pax Day. Pax Day, which is Latin for the Divine Peace, is an upcoming sandbox cloud-native MMORPG being developed by a new Nordic studio called Mainframe, and is currently using Unreal Engine 5.1. They have gotten a lot of total funding, totaling over $31 million from investors such as Andreessen Horowitz and Riot Games. They also have a partnership with Dreamhaven Studios. The game is heavily inspired by several MMOs, with EVE Online being the most prominent since many of the developers worked on that project. The following are some of the other games that have inspired Pax Day. EVE Online in terms of the emergent patterns of social and political groups and structures. Valheim in terms of the building systems, EverQuest in terms of the open world dungeon design, and Ultima Online in terms of the social aspects and PvP elements. The world of Pax Day is said to be inspired by the legends of the medieval era. The developers want the world to have a more grounded and realistic feel, but in this case magic is a real part of this world. It is confirmed to be a low fantasy setting. The players will not be the central focus of the story, and they will not be the hero of the world as we have seen in most modern MMOs. To become a hero, you will have to become a hero in the eyes of the other players. Immersion and the feeling of the world being real are a big part of what the developers want with this world. They intend to have a lot of books containing lore, quests, treasure locations, and more. Finally, RP mechanics such as transmog, dice rolling, and emotes will be in the game. What about the world size of Pax Day? We don't know the exact size, but the developers have said the world is very large indeed. The world is divided into provinces, each of which is 100 square kilometers. There are many provinces, and each has its own map. Not all locations will have a map, however. There is also an in-game map in the UI. The map is said to not be highly granular and will be missing some details, and it will be on the players to fill in the details. The developers want the size and scale of the world to matter, and they want distances to matter for crafting, gathering, and building. They also want players to be able to play together and not have to travel for hours to meet up. Players will start their journey in Pax Day in an area called the Heartlands. This is an area that is a PvP safe zone and is at a higher elevation from which players can see a long ways. Anything the player can see they can get to from these areas. The further you venture from the Heartlands, the greater the dangers. These dangers might include stronger NPC enemies, and they could include PvP areas potentially, but the exact PvP system is still unknown. There are multiple Heartlands safe areas on the map, not just in the starting area. Many of the Heartlands seem to possibly be in the valleys and near the center of the world. What about servers and the number of players per server? Well, the developers have some very lofty goals for this one. The world of Pax Day will be broken up into individual shards, but the aim according to MMORPG.com is for the total player count per shard to be 20k per shard. From Discord, we also see that they say it will be bigger than 5k at a minimum. Technology is in place to stitch servers together for various parts of the land. Spire, one of the developers on the official Discord, mentioned that each server might host a specific patch of land, and when you move to a different patch of land, you might go to another server. But in essence, there will still be separate servers. The stitching is a technical thing to decrease each server's load. There are no instances in Pax Day. The entire game is an open world. There will probably be no RP servers, and the developers have plans to deal with overcrowded streamer servers. What about the building of the world? What parts will be built by players and what parts are going to be built by the developers? As a sandbox MMO, players will set the tone for how a server develops. Players will craft the best gear, and players will build all the cities and towns in the game. Quest giver NPCs will not be present, and quests will be delivered via notes found on items and other areas of the world. But the player stories regarding both cooperation and conflict can create incredible stories that live on for a long time, similar to what we have seen in EVE Online. The developers want players to be able to do whatever they want and not be led down a linear progression path. They want solo and casual players to have a place in this world as well, and not only be a home for the hardcore players. They want the journey to matter and the game to not only be focused on the end game. The world is being developed using a semi-procedural approach. Developers still have some input, but some of the terrain and world building is done procedurally to speed up the development of the world. The visuals of the world use a modular approach, which can give the players a tremendous amount of agency agency when crafting and building in the world. The developers are building the game for change and expansion. The developers are also building an ambient audio system that changes based on the environment and blends different audio tracks together based on what is currently happening in the area. What about magic and disease in the world of Pax Dei? Magic does exist in the world, and it takes on more forms than just in combat. Disease in the world of Pax Dei might take on magical forms. Players will not be able to create their own spells, and the process of the player attaining and using magic will take some time. It will not be something that you immediately have access to. What about the UI, voice chat, add-ons, and APIs? UI customization is planned, but they also want the default UI to be really good as well. Depth of field will be changeable. In-game proximity voice chat does not seem likely, at least always on proximity chat. Instead, we might see an invite-only voice chat or opt-in proximity chat. The only thing they have said about UI mods is any mods cannot give an unfair advantage to those that do not have the mod or add-on. This does not confirm or deny add-on support. As for data mining, the developers have said they view data mining to be a bad thing in general. Players experimenting and finding things out on their own in the game is better overall. What platforms will the game run on? The game is initially being developed to run on PC and launch on Steam, but the ultimate goal is to have a cloud-based client that easily runs on any device. The game is already running on other platforms such as mobile. VR support is not likely. A big one for a lot of people, what about the game's monetization? No pay to win is basically all we currently know. This is not a confirmation of anything, but the devs have made several comments on currencies like Plex from EVE Online. I am not going to go through all of them here, but all the posts are linked on my webpage. None of those posts say whether a Plex-like system will be in Pax Dei at all. What about character customization, combat, the camera perspective, and death penalties? There is a lot of character customization according to the devs. All players will only play as humans. The combat shown in the trailer is placeholder. Combat is action-based and directional, but is more strategic than reactive, and gear matters. Player knowledge plays a role in combat mastery. A stamina meter was mentioned in the PC Gamer article and was recently confirmed to be the main combat resource. Using a weapon increases your proficiency with it over time. Weapon swapping is confirmed, and main and offhand weapons are confirmed. Weapons will have different attack rates and damage based on their size. Charging your shot is also a known mechanic. Gathering tools can also be used as a weapon if needed. Magic combat is in the game, but it is a process to acquire and use it. You don't create a spellcaster, you become a spellcaster. There will be different schools of magic, and some magic uses reagents. Hitboxes are the same size, despite players being able to create different sized characters. Projectile physics, including gravity, are confirmed. Developers are considering ways to account for server lag with projectile collision detection. Gear is the main source of abilities and spells. The camera perspective is third person, but players can zoom in quite a bit. Finally, death will have consequences, but will not be so harsh as to discourage players. What about classes, leveling, and skills? Pax Dei is not a class-based game. Instead, your class is chosen by your gear choices, similar to New World or Throne and Liberty. There are 8 slots on the action bar, but it is not known how many skills a player will be able to slot. Leveling is based on progressing your skills and equipping different weapons and armor. There are not player levels. How is the new player experience without a lot of quests? New players will be able to make a meaningful contribution no matter the gameplay area they engage in, and will be able to quickly equip decent gear. The new player experience is currently pretty good according to the developers. Leveling is fairly quick without the need for grinding. The game does have a holy trinity. One character might be able to learn every skill and master every crafting profession, but that might not really benefit them that much. However, despite this, new players will still have a big role because each player has a limited amount of building plots, and a new player can add their building plots to a city to expand it. Alts will not be hindered despite being able to master everything on one character, potentially, because most gear is freely tradable, and housing plots can be shared with your alts. And there will be swimming, take that New World. What about PVE and the end game? As already stated, there are no quest NPCs, but there are enemy NPCs. Eventually, some interactable friendly NPCs might be added, but they are not currently in in the game. Dungeons are confirmed and raiding is also confirmed. PvE does exist in the Heartlands. Solo play is also feasible. Solo players can't do everything, but they can still do a lot. The dungeons are very large and open world and heavily inspired by EverQuest. Mastering them will take experimentation and practice. There are no dungeons in instances. All dungeons and the entire game is in the open world. Dungeons will have to be replayed many times in order to master them. Ninja loot protections will be in place, which is probably a necessity in a modern open world dungeon. Survival game mechanics like hunger and thirst appear to not be present. Food and drink appear to be used instead for buffs. Torches and campfires will also have various beneficial effects. RNG will be present in the game. Some reputations with NPC factions might be in the game. Some in-game organizations might be supported, and some might be developed by the players. Leaderboards do not seem likely in Pax Dei. Finally, developers have said that Pax Dei is not about the rush to the end game, and the journey truly matters. As for PvP, opting in will not be purely zone-based, as recently made clear in the updated official fact section of the official Discord. And there is value loss in PvP. There's also a method for players to choose how much they want to risk for greater rewards. My best guess as to what this means is that players can choose which items they drop on a PvP death when opting in, and depending on the tier and amount of items selected, that will boost the drop tables in PvE and gathering, as well as maybe XP gain and other benefits, a corresponding amount to how much the player chooses to risk. But again, this part here is just my own speculation based on the above developer comment. The developers have stated that opting into PvP will be made very clear to players. Also, consensual PvP does not mean instance battleground type of PvP. The developers want there to be risk to reward tied to the PvP system. They also want the PvP to be geared towards player politics, with the PvE more about adventuring. In-game politics will be supported. The developers are also confident that the system will please both PvE and PvP players. All players can benefit from the results of PvP encounters, even non-PvPers. I take this to mean your clan might get buffs or rewards for winning battles, similar to how Dark Age of Camelot approached it. At least for now, the developers are not considering separate PvE and PvP rule set servers. Will there be large engagements in Pax Dei? This does not confirm or deny anything with Pax Dei, but one of the developers prefers smaller scale engagements. As for player collision, it is on in PvP areas, but not in PvE areas, except when both players are wielding a weapon. Finally, an official bounty system in-game does not seem likely, as the developers want to lean on emergent gameplay for these types of systems. What about crafting, gathering, player-run businesses, and player buildings? As already stated, players will make the best gear. Being a sandbox MMO with EVE Online roots, I would expect a lot of professions and a deep crafting system. So far we have seen a gathering profession, a mining pick on the hotbars, a hammer that could be a blacksmithing hammer or a weapon, and some sort of potion that presumably is player crafted. And from Discord it appears brewing is very likely. Mining, lumbering, gathering, and farming are all confirmed. Mushrooms and reeds have been seen as gatherables in the world. Fiber, mushrooms, berries, meat, hide, bones, and lumber have been seen in the inventory. Crafting benches have also been seen, and they appear to have a tier system. The crafting system is built with a modular design that allows for high customizability by the players. Crafting is a major part of the game and economy. Players can make it the main thing they do in the game. Players cannot master all professions, but some will go well together. Some crafting is skill-based, which might suggest a crafting minigame of some sort, and some are time or process-based. Flowers are a big part of the crafting system. Very few recipes will not involve flora or fungi of some type. Discovery is a part of crafting. Player names might also be on some crafted gear. Reliance on other players is a thing. You cannot do everything yourself. Food and drinks are made and traded by the players themselves. Musical instruments might be in the game, and presumably they would be crafted. And the developers have plans to deal with server lag from players having huge inventories of crafting materials. Some time gating mechanics appear to be in the game for PvE and crafting. As for gathering, it has been called a non-system system. Anything you can see, you can gather. This makes me think it might be similar to Elder Scrolls Online, where every player can gather everything. Fishing is also confirmed, and low-level resources will retain value, so it could be assumed the low-level resources might be needed to craft the next tier of gear similar to New World. Trade runs might be more of an organic thing and not a built-in system. As for player-run businesses and player shops, they are both said to be a thing in Pax Dei. As for the player building system, as stated before, players will build all the housing, cities, and towns in the game. Buildings will get damaged and wear out and need to be repaired. There is room for everyone to build in the world, but some areas might be better than others. Like the crafting system, the building system is highly customizable. Players will need to own a plot to build on, and if the plot does not exist, then the building will start to decay. If a structure is abandoned, it will become a free-for-all, meaning the world will not be filled with abandoned buildings. Buildings can be moved by the players as well, and there are many reasons why the players might want to do that. There will not be terraforming of the land. As for players building roads, players will not build roads, at least for now, but maybe in the future. The roads will be built exclusively by the developers for now. Players will have to experiment to find the best ways to build. The building system has been described as similar to Valheim. Structural limitations will be in place based on physics. There will not be a test mode to test your structures. You can share your plots and build together with other players, and doing so will have some advantages. The main being that your normally round plot will become a square plot when connected to another player's plot, thereby giving more space to build. Buildings in the Heartlands will be completely safe. In other areas, they might not be. Building in the Heartlands will be forgiving, so it might be assumed the cost to build and maintain might be lower. As for the best location to build, the developers have said the best place to build will be wherever your friends are. Finally, underground structures will exist but will not be man-made. What about gearing, inventory, storage, and consumables? Power is not based on gear score, but gear will matter. Gear will take damage and wear out over time and need to be repaired. This wear is visible on the gear's model in the game. Gear has tiers. All items are freely tradable. You must build your own storage. These are the gear slots seen so far. The developers have said that there will be reasons to retire your gear. PvE players can get the best gear in the game without engaging in PvP, and PvP is not forced. Using the best gear might not always be optimal. For simpler encounters, you might want to use the lower tier gear. There is no best gear. Gear is dependent on the encounter. Gear will be best for a specific thing in game. Supply demand can drastically affect the value of the gear based on what is popular in the game. Players can equip any gear, but without having leveled the skills of that gear, you may not be effective with it. The developers want to eliminate the massive gear grind before new players can even try to play together with their friends. The developers want food and consumables to be really meaningful, but don't want them to be a nuisance, and some potions will have gameplay effects. There's no item Tetris for the inventory like in ARPGs. We have seen 24 bag slots in the videos so far. The developers want the inventory to matter more for crafting materials, building, and trading than they do for gear and things needed for PvE. So maybe we will see a separate storage for finished gear, but that is speculation. As for storage, players build their own storage, and that storage can be set to public. Players can set many different permissions on their storage, such as clan, specific people, or the public. What about mounts and pets, clans, religions, and other social organizations? Mounts are a distinct possibility based on this comment. Animals are an integral part of the gameplay. The interactions go well beyond the kill on sight of animals. The game has a clan system which has been seen in the UI from the gameplay videos. The devs don't want to dictate the size of clans. Inter-clan connections and alliances are being considered. Religion is confirmed by this Discord post, and it seems to have a big role in the game as well. Player weddings sound like it might be more of a player-driven thing with housing, churches, and all the available role-playing elements available, but the devs are considering some in-game functionality, potentially, as well. What about testing, server regions, and languages? Some smaller scale invite-only tests have already happened, and bigger tests are said to be happening soon, which you can sign up for on their website. There will be wipes during testing. As for an MDA or streaming during alpha, the developers do not have an answer for that just yet. The friend codes for the alpha allow players to hopefully get invited to the same alpha test. The starting zone for the alpha is called Galia, which is divided into several Heartland provinces such as Mary and Caries. The developers intend to support as many regions as possible. The game is initially going to be translated into English, French, and German. Future languages will be considered based on community feedback. Rounding out the known information about Pax Dei, the developers have said they don't want to run a wiki and would prefer a community-run wiki instead. There is no blockchain in Pax Dei. Lakes and rivers are confirmed, but sailing and roads are not likely in the initial release of the game, but there is still some gameplay involving the water. There are some interesting ideas about how the cloud-native part of the game could work with Twitch streaming, but nothing is confirmed for Pax Dei. Details of this are found on my website. That covers absolutely everything we currently know about this exciting upcoming MMO. I continue to be more and more interested about this MMO the more I learn about it. Be sure to check out my website for all the sources mentioned in the video. And again, the link is in the video description. With that, guys, if you liked the video, consider subscribing, and I will see you guys in the next video.